Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Jesu, meine, Seele, which translates to Jesus, it is by you that my soul. Apologies for the typo. This is BWV 353, not BWV 352. I have analyzed that chorale, and you can check it out on the channel as well, just by searching for BWV 352 analysis. Fairly straightforward chorale. Really not too much to write home about here. There's one particular instance that's kind of interesting to me, but all in all, mostly, almost exclusively functional harmony in the way that we would expect, and we're just going to hop right into the analysis. So, 2 flats in the key signature. We start on G minor, we end on G major. I reckon the overall tonality of this chorale is G minor. Passing tones in the lower voices here, and a neighbor tone in the alto, giving us A, C, F sharp, and D, which is D7 over A. That's 5-4-3 in passing, and that takes us to B, D, G, and D, which is G minor over B flat. Sorry, this is a B flat, which is our tonic triad in first inversion, passing tone in the bass, and then we get D, D, F sharp, and A, which is our 5-chord D major in root position. We then have C, D, G, and B flat. C is an accent and non-chord tone. This is actually G minor in first inversion again, this B flat being the third of the chord. And we're closing in on our cadence. We have A, C, G, and C. I reckon this G is a 7-6 suspension over the bass. And this is actually F sharp diminished over A, 1-6 going to 7-6. We would typically expect a tonic triad after this. G, D, G, and B flat, which is what we get. 1-6-7-6-1, very common pattern in Bach. Anticipation in the melody. C, E flat, G, and A. A minor 7 flat 5 over C. We know that Bach loves 2-6-5 chords, especially in cadential contexts. We end on a perfect authentic cadence here with D, D, F sharp carried over from earlier in the measure, and A, which is our 5 chord. Passing 7th in the tenor, and then we cadence on G minor, G, B flat, D, and G. Tonic triad root position. Next phrase ends in a half cadence. It's still in G minor, no modulation in the A section. We start off with G minor, G, D, G, and B flat. No need to reanalyze. Passing 7th in the bass, E flat, G, G, and B flat. It's E flat major, that's a 6 chord, passing 7th in the bass, passing tone, it's just passing tone in the alto. Kind of gives us a bit of a passing tonic 7 chord vibe, but I don't really think that that's what's being implied here. It's more incidental than actually impacting the harmony. We then have C, G, E flat, and A. Sorry if I said any E naturals up until this point. They should be E flats, but this is A minor 7 flat 5 over C. Another sort of cadential progression leading up to our actual cadence. We have D, F sharp, D, and A, which is a 5 chord in root position, D major, subdivided progression. And here we have E flat, G, D, and G. This could be a 6-7 chord. I do actually think this is a 4-6 chord though, because this D feels like it's operating like a 7-6 suspension over the bass, making this C really the, in my opinion, the root of the chord. But it could be 6-7, an incomplete 6-7 chord. They're basically the same chord. Can't spell 6-7 without 4 anyways, so they're basically interchangeable in terms of function and tones. After 4-6 we have A, C, and F sharp, which is F sharp diminished over A. 4 typically goes to 7 anyway, so maybe that's even a stronger argument for this being 4. We then have C, which is a chord tone, don't need to mark it. We then have G, B flat, D, and G, tonic triad root position. G is our tonic here, so we don't need to mark it. And then we cadence on D major, which is our 5. D, F sharp, D, and A. Next phrase ends in a perfect authentic cadence in the key of F, not the first key that I would expect Bach to go to, but not the last either, kind of like a mid-tier key in terms of the overall keys that I would expect Bach to go to. He goes to the key of the subtonic with some frequency, but we start off in G minor, D, D, F sharp, and A. It's another 5 chord, no need to reanalyze, and that takes us to 1, G, D, G, and B flat, which also happens to be our 2 in the key of F major, passing 7th on the bass, and then we have E natural, C, G, and C, which is C major over E, it's 5-6, and then we move to F, F, C, F, and A, which is our tonic triad in root position, passing 7th on the bass, and then we have D, D, F, and B flat, which is 4-6, passing tone in the tenor, and then we have E flat, C, D, F, and A. Kind of an interesting chord here. I reckon that this D, or I guess this C and this A, are probably both accented non-chord tones by virtue of the fact that this D is being held over. But yeah, probably B flat, D, F, and G being used here, which is G minor 7 over B flat, 4-6 going to G minor 7. We sort of have like a buffer here that separates the 4-6 with the 2 with some implied F major action going on. But it's not exactly the chord that we get. In fact, this 2-6-5 chord with the accented non-chord tones leads where we would expect. We have a C, C, F, and G, this F being a 4-3 suspension over the bass, very common in dominant chords. Then the resolution happens on the next beat with the passing 7th here in the tenor, and then we cadence on F, F, A, C, and F. Tonic triad, root, position. Next cadence is a perfect authentic cadence in the key of B flat. We pretty much spend the whole phrase in the key of B flat. Now to me, it sounds like we start the phrase, I mean, really there's nothing stopping us from just saying that this F major chord is moving to the key of B flat, because it's just a lot of alternation between B flat and F, and then B flat again. It's kind of hard to pinpoint an exact moment where the modulation happens, but really the entirety of this phrase does sound B flat like to me. So I'm just gonna make the decision here and call this F5 in the key of B flat, and just, I guess, sort of classify this cadence here as more of like a glorified half cadence in the key of B flat, because we're cadencing on the dominant of B flat here, and this one is more so functioning like the dominant of B flat rather than the tonic of the key of F in the grander scheme of the form, B flat being closer in relationship to G minor. A lot of G minor forms in Bach alternate, or I guess key schemes alternate between G minor and B flat in succession, just as an observation that I had with Bach's relationship with G minor. Not always, but a great deal, many of times. But after B flat, this F chord, it could really be any one of these chords through the beginning of the next phrase that could take us to the key of B flat, because really until we see E flats, we don't have a clear indicator that we are in the key of B flat. It's just based on feel. So this is a modulation zone. I tend to mark modulations as late as possible when given the proper context, but here it just feels like this phrase is in the key of B flat. Just my opinion. We actually start off with 1-6, D, D, F, and B flat major over D, and then we go to F again, F, A, F, and C. It's our 5 chord. We then have B flat in root position, B flat, F, and D, tonic triad. Passing tone in the bass, neighbor tone in the alto, and then we have D, B flat, F, and B flat, which is just our tonic in first inversion, and then B flat's a chord tone and D is also a chord tone, so we don't need to mark them. We then have G, B flat, G, and E flat, which is 4-6, E flat major over G. Then we have some passing tones here in the lower voices, which does fit this pattern of 4-6 going to 1, B flat, D, G, and D, or so I thought. B flat going to 1, the lower voices did prepare me to go to a 1 chord, but it's actually 6, 6, which is just a substitute for 1. But here we have a subdivided 7, 7 chord, 7 half diminished, probably the most common subdivided chord progression in all of Bach, where typically with this 6-7-1 bass pattern here, Bach will always connect the 6th and the 1 of the scale with a leading tone. And when I say always, I mean virtually always. There's one instance that we actually came across recently that has this moment where it is directly 6 going to 1, which is pretty atypical. And the chord does get turned into root position on this beat right here. So a bit of a deceptive progression in terms of subverting our expectations, but 6, 6, and 1, basically the same chord. They sound very similar. The only difference is G versus F, but this G is held for a long period of time and then eventually falls to F. So the trajectory is there, but all in all, yeah, we're not expecting a G minor chord here. We're expecting B flat major. But afterwards we get E flat, G, G, and C, which is C minor over E flat, 2-6. We know that Bach loves 2-6 chords in cadential contexts especially. We go to 5 afterwards, F, A, F, and C, passing 7th in the alto, and then we cadence on B flat major, B flat, D, and B flat, 3 roots and 1 third. Next phrase ends in a half cadence in the key of G minor, but we start and spend the majority of the phrase in the key of B flat. So we have F, C, F, and A. That's our 5 chord, F major, and then we get G, B flat, E flat, E flat and B flat. I'm going to call that 4-6, but you could also call that 6 if you wanted to, depending on how you hear this D. I hear that more as a passing 7th, so I'm not going to I'm going to consider this a 4-6 chord. And then we have A, F, C, and C. That's our 5 chord in first inversion. It's just an interesting pattern here. Actually, we have 5, 4, 6, 5, 6. We know we typically see 1, 6, 7, 6, 1, or the reverse of that progression in Bach. Here we're seeing 5, 4, 6, 5, 6, where Bach is connecting part of the scale using 2 similar triads, one in root position and one in first inversion, and the bridging chord being a chord that is in first inversion and the root a diatonic step below. It's a pattern we see all the time in Bach. Like I said, mostly with root and 7 chords, or root chords and a 7 chord, but sometimes we see it with 4 and 3. We've seen it with 3 and 2, if I'm not mistaken, and here we see it with 5 and 4. I think we've seen it with 6 and 5 as well, but there are a couple of patterns we haven't seen, but we do see it with other chords, with 1 and 7 being the most common permutation. We also have a passing 7th here in the tenor before we get B flat, D, F, and D. That is our tonic triad in root position. Apologies. And then I do think this is where we modulate to the key of G minor, and this becomes our 3 chord. The only reason why I feel like that is the case has to do with the fact that the next chord is or would be analyzed as a secondary dominant, and I feel like really the modulation is happening earlier than that with everything else going on. It just so happens to be diatonic pitches up until this point. But this G is an accented non-chord tone. This A is a passing 7th, and this G is also a passing tone. We actually have F sharp, D, A, and C, which is D7 over F sharp. It's pretty common for us to see 3 to go to 4-3. Sorry, I pointed to this 1 chord here because it's quite common for 3 to be contextualized with 4-3, but here we see it being contextualized with 6-5, which is pretty interesting. Like, it's very common to see a passing 5 chord after a 3 chord in minor especially, but here we see it with 6-5, just a continuation of this downward trajectory bass, the difference between A being our sort of bass resolution and F sharp being the bass resolution, so a little bit different. We see this with 4-2 chords sometimes as well, where a 4-2 chord will resolve to a root position triad just by virtue of the way the bass moves, but still the bass resolves the way we would expect. Regardless, that's a bit of a tangent. After 5-6-5 we go to 1, G, D, G, and B flat, tonic triad, root position, and then we move to 5. D major, D, D, F sharp, and A. Now we're in the key of G minor for the rest of the chorale, and in a perfect authentic cadence we have B flat, D, G, and G. Tonic triad in first inversion here, G minor over B flat, passing tone in the bass, G, D, D, and A. This G is probably a lower suspension or an accented non-chord tone. This is actually 5/6, D major over F sharp, and that resolves to G minor, G, D, G, and B flat, passing 7th in the bass, and then we have E flat, C, G, and C, which is 4/6, C minor over E flat. Then we have 3 passing tones here, which is kind of interesting. We have D, we have D, we have G, and we have B flat, which is 1/6/4 in passing, and that takes us to C, E flat, G, and A. A minor 7 flat 5 over C. Again, Bach with the 2-6-5 chords. He loves them in cadential contexts especially. We then move to D major, D, A, F sharp, and A. It's our 5 chord root position. Anticipation here in the melody. D is a chord tone, so we don't need to mark it, and we cadence on good old G major, G, B natural, D, and G. Bach often ends his chorales that are in a minor key with a major tonic, and I've speculated as to why this is the case, but for me I feel like it's more so about the relationship that Bach has with minor having a stronger sense of finality. Like it could be because he wants to end on a more uplifting note, but for me I feel like maybe Bach had a relationship with major and major having like a more than just tonic quality. It was also the fact that the major third is just a stronger interval. But then again, that's just speculation. I don't know why it's conventional for Bach to do it. He doesn't always do it, so it's anyone's guess is as good as mine. Maybe there's some scholarship on the topic, but that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about in today's chorale. Really, the only interesting thing for me is the 5-4-6-5-6 progression. That's just based on me having really focused a lot on 1-6, 7-6, and 1 in all of Bach's chorales. For me, when I see patterns like that deviate from our usual suspect here, it's pretty cool to point out. So something that will go into my notes for sure. That's pretty much it. So if you're interested in following me along on the journey to analyze all of Bach's chorale harmonizations, feel free to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification icon and like the video if you enjoyed the content as well. Thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel by doing so. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.